Well, today it's the 3rd of October, and we're looking at the September numbers for the Fraser Valley in specific. I mean, I'm always a numbers kind of a guy, but numbers and statistics are, for special people. In fact, George Bernard Shaw said it's the mark of a truly intelligent person to be moved by statistics. So all of you viewers that are watching us and are moved by statistics, you're truly intelligent. Well, we are truly intelligent, or we're going to be more intelligent, because I'm being joined by Brent Roberts, who is the #1 realtor in the Fraser Valley. He's been there for some 35 years. Man, you don't look that old.
Well, thanks, Ozzie.
And so he's with Royal LePage, of course, and so we're going to go do a deep dive in the numbers and talk a little bit about the real estate market, which is our favorite thing to talk about. How are things out there?
Well, they're pretty good, thanks. The summer has been a little bit quieter, and you can see by the numbers as we'll chat about them. But there's still active, activity going on for sure.
But it's harder, no? I mean, people, I know the banks are still tough. The rates are down a little bit. I mean, much better than they were, say, 3 or 4 months ago, but
Right.
it's still harder to qualify.
Well, as a matter of fact, these three rate reductions that we've seen haven't moved the market a significant amount at all. People are still waiting and seeing, when their finance minister states that, we're dropping the rates today, but we're going to drop them more. It doesn't incentivize people to make a move.
That's right. They're going to say, well, look, if it's 5% now and 3% next year, 2% on our enormous mortgages that we have in British Columbia, I mean, 500,000 or 600,000 is quite normal. Well, 2% reduction in price. I say, maybe I'll wait. I'm going to put off. So the buyer is in a sort of a waiting kind of a mode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The funny thing
Sure.
is that the owner, though, is in a waiting mode too. He thinks with lower interest, they're going to have higher prices.
Well, exactly. And I've always said this, Ozzie, that, one of my famous quotes there's always motivation in the market. Sometimes it's either the buyers are motivated or the sellers are motivated. So, you definitely have a difference of who's motivated right now.
Well, and it's your job as an agent to get them together, right? You can bring the owner down a little bit and the buyer up a little bit, and then hopefully they do a transaction. But it's not as easy. And the reason why is when you take a look at the actual numbers that we've seen in September, it comes to mind that we are in a different kind of a world. So we'll just take a quick look at
Absolutely.
the numbers. Now, I just want to make sure, can you see those numbers?
I sure can, Ozzie.
Yeah, okay. So what we have is when you look at Fraser Valley for the end of September, so what I normally put up in my Ozbuzz newsletter, that's Ozbuzz.ca, which is a free newsletter, and that'll be out, by the way, this weekend. So all of these numbers that if people don't see them quick enough, well, they can see them again in the newsletter. But I take the last 4 years. So for instance, the top line, the sales in the Fraser Valley for single family homes were 362 in September this year, 396 last year. So we're down about 9%.
Right.
And then we go to 2022, was about the same. And then in September 2021, we were a whopping 100% higher than what we had this year. So really depends on what you compare yourself with. And that brings back to mind the idea of statistics. But briefly, the active listings are up 14% for single family homes. New listings are up 11%. Not that big a difference. But on the condo side, the active listings are up 45%. That's a whopping increase. New listings are up 26%, and sales down 14%. So you can see that if you measure ourselves over the last few years, volume-wise, sales-wise, is down quite substantially.
Well, and you're right. And because of that, too, we've got now a record amount of listings. We haven't had more listings. We have more listings currently right now than we've had in the past 10 years. And of course, that's a lot to do with the sluggish. As you see, you've pointed out that in some cases here, we're down 50% from a few years ago. So when you have a lot less sales, you're definitely going to have a lot more listings sitting on the market waiting for a buyer.
Well, and the crazy thing is that for some reason, we think a good market is when 6 guys wrestle each other to the ground in the living room of the seller, and one emerges victoriously, having paid 100,000 more than the guy even wanted, right? That's a good market. But then a market where the agent has time, where there's fewer agents, where there's more product, where I can really get a good deal, buyer backs off. So that's the crazy, wonderful world of real
Well,
estate.
absolutely. And I can share this with you as well. And you know this from the business, but the buyer has options now. They have a lot of options. They're very picky. They're very selective. Before in the market that you just talked about, when they're wrestling each other down, you didn't have time to do an inspection. You didn't have time to do financing. You didn't have time to do your normal due diligence. Today, this is the type of market I love because the buyer has a chance to do their due diligence. They can look at the property and then a week later they can review it again, where they don't have to worry about it being sold on Tuesday next week. They've got some choices. Now, a good house that's listed properly is getting sold quickly still. So the market is not dead. It's definitely just more accurate right now.
Yeah, and I think I want to get into that, how to best show your property later, because that's the key, right? But when we take a few, to make sure they understand the depths of the decline of the market, if we look at the running total means the 12 months preceding a certain date. So if you looked at Vancouver, for instance, on September 30th, 2020, that whole year till September 30th, 2021, sold 14,730 single-family homes. Well, the same year, but from September 30, 23 to September 30, 24, had 7,100. That's Vancouver. That's
That's substantial.
50% decline. Now, if you go a little lower and look at the same numbers for September 2020 to September 2021 in the Fraser Valley, we had 12,430 houses and now 5,148 in this last year, ending just a few days ago. Well, that's a 60% decline or close to it. That's
exactly. That's even worse than Vancouver stats right now.
Yeah. And when you take a look at the condo sales in the Fraser Valley, it was 7,017. Now it's 4,309. Wow, right? It's no wonder, as you point out, that we have a lot of listings out there. And so when we only look at last year, we're down 9%. So what, right? Well, but we're down 60% in the number of sales that we had just a few years ago. And as you can see, every year it went down. We went in 22, we're down to 7,000. Then in 23, we're down to 5,300 and so on. But here's the big surprise, to me anyways. When you take a look at the prices, the single-family prices in 2021, September 30, was 1,400,000. And now it's 1,542,000. It doesn't look like there was a big price collapse. I mean, there was a big price collapse if you went back to February 2022. That's when my newsletter I put in the high is in place. And I think the Surrey single-family home was up to an astounding 1,900,000. And
that's exactly where it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it dropped by $400,000 until December, right? But from
actually, Ozzie, you're absolutely right. It actually dropped from $1.9 million to 1.3. So it over dropped. I mean, it dropped farther than it should. It went up way higher than it ever should have. And then, of course, the reciprocal is it dropped farther than it should have. And now it's kind of come to a baseline, it seems.
Yeah, and that's the key. So we went from 1,000,009 in February down to 1,000,003 in December 2022. And then we recovered and we're now at 1,000,005, which is still not exactly cheap for any kind of a single family home in Surrey, because that means any real nice single family home is still bringing more than that, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing is that you're in a situation where, again, there's first of all choices, which is nice. But, when these interest rates are what they were, because a couple of years ago, the interest rate was free. And now even though it's had 3 drops lately, it's because of the cost. I mean, when you're paying an extra $1,200 a month per 100, for this amount of money, it's just unbearable for the cost of the people. No wonder the prices have to come down.
Yeah, and the thing is, so but overall, when you take, I mean, we went like crazy from 21 into early 22. That was the multiple offer time. It was an absolute exaggeration, which then resulted in that 1,000,009 single family home that was February of 2022. And I just looked at it at the time and said, just no way that we're going to go higher from there. And we didn't. So that's
Well,
quite
and you wisely told everybody on Ozbuzz, and hopefully everybody's following it, because first of all, it's free and it's brilliant. So you were telling everybody at the time to make sure that, hey, we're at the top. And in 35 years, I had never seen, we hit 93% of all our listings were selling at that particular, I think it was February of that year. So when 93% are right now, our average, we're selling 11% of the market selling. That means 9 out of 10 are not selling right now, whereas that was 93 out of 100 were selling. Could you imagine if you were one of those 7 that didn't sell? Something's wrong here.
Well, that's it, right? You had but that's, whatever the market is, if it's 40% down, your job as a realtor is to get your clients into the 60% that sell. I'm an old branch manager, and I said, don't tell me how much it's down. Tell me what I have to do to get it into the ones that sell. And the ones that sell is very logical, right? They are in the best shape in their neighborhood. They cut the lawn, they painted the front door, whatever needed to be done to bring it up to its special feeling, and that makes a sense. I'm just putting these out because when you take a look that throughout that period at that 456,000 for the average condo in Surrey, we went to 564, 540, and we're still at 559,000 on average. So it didn't, with the exaggeration of fall 2021 to spring 2022, we have pretty well, stayed the same. When you consider that we have so many fewer sales, we stayed quite stable. So let's leave the numbers. But the point I was trying to make was that, I am a real estate oriented guy, right? And my philosophy was always that there are 4 macro environments determine why you should stay in real estate. And in my book, Forget About Location, people are always saying, you wrote a book, location. No, I wrote Forget About Location. And the point was that I felt that first, we have to be in an inflationary environment, and that comes from the Milton Friedman quote that inflation is primarily a monetary phenomenon. Well, a monetary phenomenon, we live in the mother of all monetary phenomena worldwide, right? So inflation is a given. But number 2 is timing. And then number 3 is cycles, and number 4 is the trend. But just looking at the first 2, I mean, yes, we have an inflationary environment. Anybody believes we have a 2% inflation has to have their head examined. Nothing is up only 2%. I mean, in the last 4 years, we are probably 25% because it accumulates. But the point is, so the inflation is there, but timing is something else. Certainly from a buyer's perspective, and as we pointed out earlier, the buyer sits there and says, I'm not sure whether I should go in. But then every market is different. Maybe the condo market is worse off than the single-family home market, because right across the country, single-family homes are actually doing reasonably well in terms of the number of sales, whereas condos are piling up, in particular, like in Toronto. And even in Calgary, condo sales are down almost 30%, and the volume of sales is followed, although prices in Calgary are actually still higher. But the key is more sales are coming up. But then there's also different markets in the market. For instance, the pre-sale market. What do you think about that?
Well, and just talking about timing, I just want to go back there for a second. I remember years ago, our market wasn't very good. And this was years and years ago. And one of the realtors in our office meeting said, what should I get my customer that we've had for our 1-year anniversary of being listed? And one guy says, oh, you should get them a bottle of wine. Another person said you should get them a basket. And of course, Brent Roberts says, I think you should get them a price reduction form. So I mean, at some stage of the game, you can always be overpriced, even when we had 93% of our market selling. There's some great opportunities in pre-sales right now, Ozzie, and you and I have chatted about it in the past. I mean, they're offering so much incentive to both the buyers and to the realtors right now, because they need a certain amount of sales, and they were chugging along quite well, and all of a sudden the music stopped. And so they're offering all sorts of incentives, lower deposits, lower down payments, less penalty if you flip out of it afterwards. You and I have both seen they've offered cars for people, in respect to.
Well, and it's logical that you're right. I mean, what many people don't realize, and it seems like our government doesn't realize, is that you do need investors, you need buyers on a pre-sale building. It's not because that's what the owner would like or the developer would like. He has to have 60% or more of all of his sales in the bank, like people saying, I will buy this unit down the road. Only then will he get the financing construction from the bank. And so when it gets, and then of course at the same time the government limits him to a year and where he can raise this number of buyers. So let's say he's at 60% of his 60%, or he needs 100 sales and he has 80. Those last 20 as a savvy buyer, that's where you want to be in, because he needs those 20 or he can't do any construction. He might even have to pay the deposits back on the others. We had an anemic summer in pre-sale. Usually by November, December, pre-sales are over. So this is the month. October is the month where if you are in a pre-sale buyer, imagine you get 5% down. By the time the building is finished on a low rise, maybe 2.5 years from now, interest rates of all the experts and gurus out there, they say interest rates are going to be down. All of our banks say by next summer it's going to be down 3% to 3%, some as low as 2.5%. So if that's the case, now I also saw Anthem, for instance, right now offers you a 12% interest on your deposit. So for the larger building, and you have put up a couple of 100,000, and it takes you 5 years, well, you're earning 12% on your money while you wait. So all of these things, they don't do this because they like us. They do this because they want to give us incentives.
And there's a perfect example of what you're saying, Ozzie. 12% interest is really them buying your money because they want the money, they need the sale to go through to get to that 60%, like you're saying, or else they're out of business. They're not in a position where they can develop. So a 12% return is far better than you're getting at the bank at 5%. So it's offering incentive, it's incentivizing people to do this and look at it and saying, hey, by the way, as rates do fall, you're in a much better position as well.
And that's why I think the buyer today is scared, and rightfully so. You've got to be careful. This is a crazy world. Never mind wars and pestilence and spending money and debts, and the confusion is the worst part. But if you believe in real estate like I do, and I think you want to have your own home, a pre-sale right now, you can wait it out. You get minimal down payments, and at the same time, you might just make that stink bid. And people say, oh, I couldn't offer that little. Listen, the owner rather has a stink bid than no bid, and so and you got to remember that if he sold half the building at $1 million a suite, let's say, and you want to make an offer at 960, well, maybe he cannot take that because all the people that paid $1 million are going to be upset. But maybe he can give you a furniture package, or maybe, like you pointed out, maybe you get a car. Ask for it, or maybe there are some units. I saw a building this morning that offered for the top 4 suites, they offered a $25,000 price reduction. Hey, there's some deals out there where realtors can get a Porsche. Well, I put in my newsletter that's coming out this weekend that some of the commissions that are being offered are substantial. Maybe you're not going to like this, but if I was a buyer, first of all, I would hit the owner with a lowball offer, and then I would hit the realtor with a lowball offer. You're going to have that $40,000 commission. How about 10?
Well, and you're absolutely right. If I'm getting a brand new car because I helped my customer buy it, now, again, don't buy something if it doesn't look like good value, because there's all sorts of perks and everything else. But and I know that, a lot of these things are just to move people. Like I remember 30 years ago, when the developers had sold 60% of the building and they couldn't sell anymore. So they had to go to the original owners that bought and say, listen, we're either going to allow rentals in this building or we're going to drop the price to $70,000. And at that time, $70,000 was substantial. And the people that already previously bought, they said, well, drop the price then, because they didn't want it to be a rental building. And of course they knew they could get investors to buy with some incentives. But you're absolutely right as well when you say that the developer doesn't want to drop the price from $1 million, but they'll give you enough perks and things like that to make it look good. And then once the market changes a little bit, maybe in a month or two, they don't have to offer those incentives, and they don't have on their records, they don't have a sale that was lower than what the $1 million looked like.
In fact, the moment they have enough to start construction, they then have maybe a year or two to sell. But the thing is, they only have 1 year to get the pre-sale, and the bank wants the pre-sale. And in today's world, It used to be a bank, you could get a 60 or $70 million from one bank. Now they want 4 banks or 5 banks was a consortium. So they are sticky on the details, meaning that you have that. It's interesting the point that you make that was about 2008, 2009, when actually some of the developers, everybody dropped their price by 25%, or as you pointed out, you had a chance to stay in, but at a lower price, or you had to increase your deposit, but stay in at a much lower price. And the funny thing is, everybody that took up those deals made a fortune. I personally know a guy who picked up 3 deals from people that didn't want to close, and it made his fortune because he just believed in real estate, and and again, at the time of a market, anytime you're in a market, you think it's too high. All my life, I've heard people say the same thing. Prices are too high. Secondly, there are too many realtors in the business. Third, they say, I wish I had bought 5 years ago. So I'm not saying today is the best time, but you started saying that. Check out the builder, check out the area. Everybody is rushing to these small little condos. Personally, and I write about it extensively in my newsletter, don't buy a 300 square foot unit. I mean, maybe from a rental point of view, but half of Toronto condos that are empty right now that cannot be sold or rented. I've seen dens that are the size of my desk. You
Yes.
put a table in there, but that's a den. Are you kidding me? So,
well, and they said sooner or later, the single guy or gal that's going to go into this 300 square foot house, well, sooner or later they're going to meet somebody, and then there's going to be 2 of them, and then if they get really carried away, they might have a baby too. Now you got 3 people trying to live in this little space of 300
well, in
square.
particular, like when you look at some areas like Toronto was like 1,700 a foot for 300 square feet, you're spending 600,000. No, I'm just saying, be careful, be cautious, don't be scared, but get good quality advice from somebody that's been in the business a long time, like Brent Roberts in the Fraser Valley. I don't think there's anybody better. So you clearly you care for your people, you want to do the right thing, but don't be so scared to death that you're not taking away the opportunity. I know Warren Buffett who said that if everybody's crying, you should be buying, right? Yeah. And everybody's yelling, you should be selling. So clearly in 2021, we were all yelling, and that's really when we should have all sold. Right. So what advice would you leave people, and what should they expect to when they list a house?
Well, right now you definitely need to be sharply priced. Like you said, there's 50% less sales than there were 3 years ago, but we're, seeming to be at a baseline now that seems to be pretty good. If you've got a good, clean house and it's priced right, and by the way, if you don't have a good, clean house and it's just been an investment and it was beaten up and everything else, well, then just price it accordingly. You can't, sell it for something that was loved and cared for the top dollar. If you've got a good house and it's your principal residence, we can definitely give you an idea about value and about price. And then you want to be, having a little bit of room for negotiation, because people still want to have a bit of room for negotiation. They don't want to be stuck paying full price today, even if it's very good value. But you don't want to price it so high, Ozzie, that you don't have eyes on the property as well. They
People
say
just keep driving, they're saying, I don't have to go in there. It's out of the market. That's today's buyer lives on the internet, right? I mean,
well, exactly.
If you don't have an MLS connection, you don't have a life. I mean, people like you and me, right?
Yes.
But as a buyer, they probably know the market better than some realtors know the area. So to be way out of the market in what you're asking, you're just whistling in the dark.
Well, I've told my customers many, many times over the years, I say the customer knows the value of your house better than you do. Better sometimes, like you said, than the realtor, because they're the ones buying. They're the ones doing the research. Now, if we're moving to Nanus, for example, we'll become the expert of what we're buying in Nanus, because of the fact that, let's face it, that's what we're looking at. So we become experts to know location and price and that, but where we're not following up what we're selling. So you're right. The buyers often will know, and it's their money. They've got the money right now. They're the ones that are paying the money. If something used to cost $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and now it costs $6,000 a month, you can see how things have tightened up so much.
Sure. Yeah, no question. And what about condos with a lot of choice?
Well, you want to be in a building that's well taken care of. We definitely, we read the minutes, we look at another report that we buy to make sure that the owners know that what they're doing is buying into a building that they like, right? You want to make sure the condo fees aren't going to double. If the developer had a price on the development disclosure, and all of a sudden, now the place is built and they've realized that the costs are way lower. Now there's mandates to be protecting the buyer of that, but sometimes you'll see your condo fee go up quite a bit after you've owned it. If the company or the strata hasn't been taking care of it, I've seen one recently where they said, well, the special assessment's going to be anywhere between $70,000 and $140,000.
Bucks.
It's big bucks. Now, guess what that does to the value of the building? Well, first of all, it makes it unsaleable, number one. And number two, if these people decide not to buy or not to fix it, well, that doesn't mean the problem went away. It just means right now you don't have to do it. So if you're not reading these minutes and taking care of it and you're finding out about this, I'd be pricing my offer accordingly. If I was an investor, I'd be okay with that. But if I'm putting every single penny down that I have as a down payment, I would be in a pretty bad situation, I think.
Particularly on a used condo, you want to see what are the plans in terms of replacing. We see it all the time that all of a sudden there's a big assessment, and sometimes that's the reason for selling. That should all be disclosed, and it may be okay to pay that extra money if you get it at a better price. But again, that's why you need, I think, a quality realtor that takes a look. To me, it's always get a professional. That you want to have a professional that practices their profession, not practices on you, right? As a buyer. So, and I know that with you, people are well looked after. Well, Brent, I think we've done a good snapshot at the numbers. Clearly, we are also, you may be listening to us on a podcast right now. And if you want to get a hold of Brent or myself, you can always send an email to oz@jurock.com, and I'd be happy to pass on Brent's information. And if you're watching us on video, all the information is below the video. So thank you very much, Brent, and have a great day.
Thank you, Ozzie. Have a great day.